Hi, I'm Jack Price. I teach civil procedure at University of Richmond School of Law. I am here right now to help you tackle any possible question involving subject matter jurisdiction. Okay, so you're in federal court. The federal judge says, I will only allow you to argue your claims before me if you can show me I have subject matter jurisdiction. And so you say, well, I have to tackle this issue. How can I do it in a methodical way? The first thing I'm going to tell you to do is diagram the problem. Okay? Write on a piece of paper, P. Write on that same piece of paper, D. Draw an arrow between the two. That's your lawsuit. P versus D with an arrow between the two. That arrow is not just a point of aesthetic preference of mine. It's going to be the key. Every single arrow that you draw on that paper stands for a claim. So you might sue a defendant on 3 different claims: breach of contract, breach of duty of good faith, and fraud. 3 different claims. You need 3 different arrows. Every single arrow on your paper needs subject matter jurisdiction. You might indeed have more than just P versus D. You might have a third-party defendant. You might have multiple single defendants. There might be counterclaims by the defendant coming back. Those counterclaims, that's more arrows. You might have 10 or 20 arrows. Every single one of those arrows has to be supported by subject matter jurisdiction. So you diagram those arrows. And then for each arrow, you go through a checklist. Okay? Every single arrow. You can label them A, B, C if you want, but somewhere on your piece of paper you say arrow number 1 or A. And you go through this following checklist. You say federal question, yes or no. You say diversity, yes or no. And you say supplemental, yes or no. I'll explain each of those in turn, right? Any single arrow can appear in federal court if it's supported by any one of those. Any one of those. Supplemental is a little complicated. We'll get to that in a second, right? The point is that the court needs only one ground for subject matter jurisdiction. It might have many. You could sue a diverse party in a federal question action, and the court might have 2 grounds for subject matter jurisdiction, but it only needs 1. Okay, so every single arrow on that page, you go through your checklist, and the first thing you'll say is it a federal question? Does this arrow present a federal question? What's a federal question? A question of federal law, right? You know that, no big deal. One key thing to remember in federal question actions is the well-pleaded complaint rule. That simply means that the plaintiff's affirmative claim has to be based in federal law. Don't get confused by all the federal law discussion or talk that might be in the complaint. I couldn't file a state law claim and just buy a rubber stamp and stamp federal all over it, or federal law or federal question. That doesn't do it. The judge doesn't just blindly read the complaint, and if he sees the words federal question somewhere in there, just assume he has jurisdiction. The judge looks functionally at whether the plaintiff says it is federal law itself that gives me relief. If the plaintiff is saying that federal law gives him or her relief, then the court has subject matter jurisdiction under a federal question. So you've looked at an arrow, you've tried federal question, and you say, no, actually it doesn't work. Okay, I'll go to my next option. My next option is diversity jurisdiction. Diversity jurisdiction involves 2 key parts: complete diversity and an amount in controversy. Complete diversity means all plaintiffs are diverse from all defendants. Okay, complete is different than minimal. In very rare cases, you can have minimal diversity. But for most jurisdictional questions involving diversity, you need complete diversity. Okay, so how do you figure out whether or not there's complete diversity? Make a list of the citizenship of each and every party in the lawsuit, or each and every party at each end of the arrow, rather, right? So make citizenship determinations on each end of the arrow. And for humans, they are citizens of the places where they reside and intend to remain. Corporations are citizens of the place where they maintain their nerve center. That's their principal place of business, where it's run by the leaders of the corporation. Other entities are citizens of the state of the members, right? So an association of many thousands of people could be a citizen of multiple states, if not up to 50 states. Okay, So remember, you're on your checklist. You've checked federal question. You're checking diversity. You're in the middle of checking diversity. You've diagrammed each party on either side of the arrow with their citizenship. You look at that and you say, if there are 3 states over here, Ohio, Illinois, and California, you look on the other side of the V, and if you see Ohio, Illinois, or California over there, you do not have complete diversity. If you do not see those over there, you do have complete diversity. Okay, great. Now, you still have to figure out amount in controversy. Amount in controversy in federal court must be in excess of $75,000. So $75,001 or more. So you have to figure out whether or not that's enough. And you can aggregate certain claims together. If P sues D on 3 different claims, you've got 1 P in the case, 1 D in the case, but you've got 3 arrows drawn between them, you can add up all the money that's claimed in those 3 arrows. It might be over 75 in each claim. It might be under 75 in each claim. But as long as all 3 of them together add up to over 75, that's good enough for the amount in controversy. Now, if you have multiple P's and multiple D's, you can't aggregate. All right. So you've gone through your analysis for federal question. You went through your analysis for diversity jurisdiction. And now you're going to try supplemental jurisdiction. Remember, if you've got jurisdiction under federal question, you don't even have to go any further. Of course, if the question says, is there diversity jurisdiction, you need to focus on that. But if you got it under FQ, you don't need to go any further. If you strike out on FQ, but you do have it on diversity, you don't have to go any further. If you strike out on diversity, you go to supplemental jurisdiction. One hitch on supplemental jurisdiction is you can't have supplemental jurisdiction if that's the only claim in the case. That's because supplemental jurisdiction is what's known as piggyback or tag-along jurisdiction. All right? Supplemental jurisdiction is the caboose that gets to tag along with the rest of the train. The rest of the train is legitimate because it fits within federal question or diversity. But supplemental jurisdiction is a tag-along. It doesn't fit within federal question or diversity. The key and central question for every possible supplemental jurisdictional claim is whether it relates to, does it relate to one of the claims in the case that fits within federal question or diversity? Does it relate to what's called the anchor claim? Right. After you figure that out, the next question you have to ask is whether or not the plaintiff is using a diversity anchor claim and acting sneaky. That's weird. I know it. Okay? What do I mean? Okay, so remember, you want to see whether or not this supplemental jurisdiction claim is related to an anchor claim, federal question, or diversity. If it's related to federal question, fine. The court's almost certainly going to get to hear it. Suppose it's related to a diversity claim. Then you got to figure out if the plaintiff is acting sneaky. What does it mean to act sneaky? I'll spare you the historical details, except to say in years past, before we had a new statute, plaintiffs used to intentionally drop certain people from a lawsuit, hope that they would later end up in the lawsuit, and then bring a claim against them at using supplemental jurisdiction when they could not have started the lawsuit off that way. So supplemental jurisdiction has limits on it for this type of sneaky behavior. What are those limits? There is a complicated worded statute that could distract you. Nothing wrong with reading the statute, but for a shortcut on tackling these problems, just listen to this. When a plaintiff is using as an anchor claim a diversity claim, it cannot rely on supplemental jurisdiction to go after a stacked defendant, that's several D's stacked on top of each other, or a third-party defendant, that is a D dragged into the lawsuit by someone else who's already been sued. Okay? Plaintiffs, if they're relying on a diversity anchor claim, cannot use supplemental jurisdiction to sue a stacked defendant or a third-party defendant. Okay, so hopefully you have a good sense of how to tackle a jurisdictional issue. You start with diagrams. You make sure you've got arrows. Every single arrow needs the support of either diversity, federal question, or supplemental jurisdiction. Hopefully that puts you in good shape for tackling these questions. Good luck.